I think the pricing is an important factor to think about, but really what we need to think about is value, right? At the end of the day, these therapies are transformative and curative. And so you have to really look at the value that they bring, of course, to the patients and for the indications that they're curing and treating, but also in the costs that they're taking out of the healthcare system. And many have tried to do this, but it's challenging not only for the healthcare economics and to be able to build that value story, but the value story is only as valuable as the person listening to it on the other end. So there's so much education that has to happen, but that is the mindset, and it has to be because these are expensive therapies when you look at them as a price tag, but when you put them into the broader context, they become a lot more palatable and quite frankly, in the long run, can actually save costs from the healthcare system, which is really the way we need to be looking at them.
The concept of cures is a new one for payers. I think we're used to paying for chronic therapies that over time you treat a disease or the symptoms of a disease. And we're still coming to terms with what that means for healthcare systems and for total overall costs for an individual's treatment journey. And so I just don't think we've figured it out. The idea of how do we price effectively a cure that is high risk to develop, it costs billions of dollars often, may or may not get approved, may or may not get covered. And so the pharmaceutical companies take on a lot of risk to bring these kinds of products to market. And we as a society need to figure out how do we adequately reimburse that risk that they've taken, and how do we measure the benefits that the healthcare system gets from those therapies. And those two things today are disconnected, unfortunately. And so I think we as an industry need to do a better job of articulating value and articulating value in the way that payers and healthcare systems think about it. So how do they think about cost offset? How do they think about, we have this concept called quality adjusted life years, which no one really knows what that means. It's sort of this health economic concept, but what does it mean in real dollars and cents or real pounds and pence? And I think that's the gap today, is we need to be able to articulate, you have this much hospitalization that's reduced, you have this much other treatments that would have been done that aren't, and these kinds of, how do you measure quality of life benefits or, returning to work and these kinds of things. So there's a package of value that we need to be able to articulate better as an industry.
Science is definitely moving faster than reimbursement systems. Single doses prove that you cannot just keep doing what we used to do. You can't pay per dose. There are many models being discussed right now, sharing risk, annuity, stage payments. But really, the next challenge is going to be, how do we track the outcomes of this in real world settings? How can we prove the durable benefits? And then we can actually look at better payment models.
What I've really experienced is that manufacturers are taking market access and patient access a lot more seriously than they had in the past, and they're approaching these conversations a lot earlier. And so that's really helping build their value narrative, and that is going to help their conversation with the payers down the road.
These treatments have a curative potential. These treatments have a long-term benefit. It is no longer a single transaction. You buy and you treat a disease. It is a transaction that you buy and cure a patient. So your return on that investment is going to be long-term. And I think those that market these products and those that make the decision about price and reimbursement need to come with a perspective that it's not on a single transaction. That's the first step of a long-term value that must be part of the equation of a return value. And so that's probably why we were going to see high prices. People would say high prices, but those high prices need to be offset on the long-term value that you get and the long-term avoidance of other costs, because it's not just like a chest infection. You give the antibiotic, you treat the chest infection, closed case. Here is patients that are either blind or are deaf. You're actually going to correct that. You're making them active members of society. You're going to provide them with the benefit, avoiding clinical follow-up, other treatments. And so this needs not only, as I said before, a different business model about the products and the choice, but also a different business model approach in terms of how the pricing and the equation about the value is being assessed by those that market and those that pay for it.
It's a challenge. The existing reimbursement structure, of course, was not designed for this. There was not many. Well, there was no such thing as a cancer cure. But we're talking about cancer cures. We're talking about horrible inherited genetic diseases now being curative. And how do you put a price on the value on somebody's life to lead a good life? I think it's a challenge. So companies really need to show the totality of the cost of this current standard of care. And that can be really difficult if there is no standard of care today. So now you're having to weigh, giving somebody a shot at life and a good shot at a good life or not. And again, how do we come up with the right pricing structure? I think it's very difficult. There's a lot of talk at the opening remarks today about, Europe needing to adopt a new model or get some type of standardization with some of the new, regulatory initiatives coming out. But I don't think any country or coalition of countries has figured it out yet. It's a difficult problem.
But that's definitely a challenge the whole industry is facing. I think we should contribute to this, each of the chain pieces of the chain on the sector. And as a CDMO, lowering cost of goods is critical, and therefore the platforms are of key importance. Development of this platform concept is critical to help decrease the cost of goods and then the pricing.
For long-term value, if we look at an example of Regeneron, there are approximately 50 children born in the U.S. with this genetic mutation. And with the patients that are already out there with this genetic mutation, it really is about democratizing the therapies. And this drives market adoption, not just for this specific gene therapy, but for everything that comes after. There's a lot of pricing conversations, a lot of pricing pressure in our administration now, the most favored nation pricing. And I believe that this is a way to address this, at least for this indication, to get things started for these critical pricing conversations and reimbursement conversations.